Welcome everybody. In today's video, we are going to be ranking all of War Thunder's top tier rank 7 planes on a tier list. Now keep in mind there is a pretty big battle rating discrepancy because there are 9.7 and 11.0 planes and even 12.0 planes in rank 7, so hopefully in this tier list we will be ranking them off of their own BR respectfully. Now, there are quite a lot of rank 7s in the game. I have tried to avoid all the copy and paste ones, so this video will be quite a long one. So grab your popcorn, sit tight, and let's get straight into it. Alrighty, our first plane is the F5E, and this plane is a battle rating 11.0 fighter for America, and this plane is very strong. It has better engines than the F5C, and it also has the amazing maneuverability and energy retention as an F5. One of the best dogfighters in the game, and in my personal opinion, this is my favorite plane in the game. You get two inline Js, which kind of, count over the inline Es on the F5C that were some people's complaints, and this plane is overall very strong. The one thing is it is a little bit slow for an 11.0, but that is basically its only weakness, as this plane is insane in everything else. So for that, this plane will be an S tier. Now I do have a lot of planes to get through, so I'm going to try to be as clear and concise as possible. Our next plane is the F4C, and this plane just sucks. It got moved down to 10.0, so it's a little bit better, but the thing is you have no countermeasures, you have a bad flight model, and you have 8 missiles, which are very good, it's a good loadout, but the missiles kind of suck. Your AIM-7D, your AIM-7, or AIM-9E are very easy to dodge, very easily to kinetic defeat, so a lot of the times the F4C just isn't that powerful, and in up tiers, you are completely cooked, and down tiers are basically your only saving grace of this plane, so for that, I'm still going to give this plane a D tier. Now, our next plane is the F4E Phantom, and this plane is very strong, and a lot of people actually don't know that the F4E is very good. Now, is it that good at a dogfight? Not really. It has Agile Eagle, so it turns a lot better. It has the wing slats. You do lose a little bit more energy, but it is more worth than having better retention. This plane has 8 missiles, and they're pretty decent. Your 4 inline Js are not bad. They don't have the best range, but they're good enough. Your AIM-72s are very strong, though. Albeit your radar does not have pulse Doppler, but a lot of the times you can still catch enemies off guard with your AIM-72s, which are very deadly at 11.3. So this plane I think is pretty decent in ARB, not the best in a 1v1, but I would still put this plane definitely in A tier. If you haven't tried this out, definitely do, it's not that bad. Now our next plane is the F8E, and this is one of the best dogfighters in the game. It's not as good as an F5B, but it has a very good loadout as well. 4 AIM-9Ds or 2 AIM-9Ds and 2 AIM-9Cs. Now, AIM-9Cs aren't that great. Run them if you want to. They're basically AIM-9Ds, but radar seeker. They have a pulse seeker, so they get flared very easily, or chaffed really easily, I should say. So it is not that great. Still, though, the plane is amazing in flight performance. The one thing I have a complaint about this plane is it is not that fast, and its engine is kind of weak. That is basically the only thing this plane really struggles at, and overall, it has very strong flight performance and a very good missile loadout kit. So I will still be putting it in S tier, and it also has a very good battle rating. Our next plane is the F4J, and the F4J is basically just a better F4E, except it has worse flight performance because it does not have Agile Eagle. So yes, you are a little bit less maneuverable, but you have very good missiles and better missiles. You have a pulse Doppler radar. It's not that good. The radar is very easy to notch, but you also get an HMD. You get your AIM-7Fs and your AIM-9Gs, which are very much usable at 12.0. Yeah, your flight model isn't that great, but your missile loadout is some of the best in the game. So F4J at 12.0, not a bad plane. I'm going to give it an A tier, below the F4E, just because I think the F4E is at a better matchmaker and meta. Okay, our next plane is the A10 Late, and this plane is at 10.7, and it has 4 inline and a very good gun. And let's be honest, at the end of the day, the A10 is not that great. Sure, some people get a lot of success with them, and I understand where that comes from. If you've played the A10 before and you're a decent pilot, sometimes you can get very high-kill games out of nowhere, but realistically, this plane is not going to win a dogfight against most planes, and you are going to get run down because you're way too slow. Your gun is amazing, your missiles are good for 10.7, but that's basically it. Otherwise, this plane is pretty bad. I'm going to give it a D tier because I don't really think this plane is that great at all. Now our next plane is the A7D, and this plane is at 10.3, it's very slow, does not have an afterburner, and only has 2 AIM-9Js. Now, 10.3 having 2 AIM-9Js is not that bad. The only problem is this plane has a terrible flight performance. It has good guns, and it has the missiles, but everything else it just really lacks. So in my personal opinion, A7D, not a very good plane. I'm also going to put it in D tier. Alrighty, now our next plane is the A7E, and the A7E is an upgraded A7D. It has AIM-9Js and also has a better engine, but at the end of the day, they're basically the same thing, and it's not going to make you any better. So this plane, not very good at ARB. I'm still going to put it in D tier. Alright, our next plane is the A10C, and this plane is at 11.7. So when A10 at 11.7, just keep that in mind. And you have for aim-9Ms. That is your main strength of this plane. Your aim-9Ms are going to be very strong. They have a lot of range, and they are on a terrible platform. That is the only thing the A10 really kind of lacks. It sucks. It's way too slow. It is maneuverable, but it's just not that great in a dogfight, and I would not see this plane being very successful. It is usable, and trust me, when it first came out, it was pretty strong, but it's just not reliable enough. I'm going to put it in C tier, as I don't think this plane should go any higher. Now, our next plane is the F-105D, and this plane is at 10.0, so it did get moved down, and it also has no countermeasures and 4 aim-9Es, pretty similar to the F-4C, where you are relatively fast, no flares, and you have some missiles, but it has less missiles. The flight model isn't very good. Your gun has a lot of ammo, and it's a good gun, but otherwise, the F-105D just is basically a free kill, and this plane in dogfight just gets completely shot on by every single plane in the game, so I'm going to have to put it in D tier. A competent pilot can make it work, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be that strong. Alright, our next plane is the F-111A, and you are at 10.7 with 6 aim-9Bs, so you have a pretty goofy loadout, but realistically, it's not going to be that good. Now, this plane's flight performance is pretty trash. It is fast, really, really fast on the deck, but the thing is, you lose so much energy when you turn. You can go from Mach 1.5 to Mach 1 in literally one hit of the elevator in half a second, so this plane just sucks in a dogfight. You can make it work if you are good enough, but at the end of the day, this plane just does not have the flight performance going for it. Your missiles are pretty bad, and the speed is all it has, so a plane like this will never be that great. I'm going to put it probably in low D tier. I don't want to be too harsh and give it an F tier, but come on, man, this plane just isn't that great. Our next plane is the F-111F, and you are at 11.7 with 6 aim-9Ls, so your loadout is not that bad at all. The thing is, same issue with the F-111A. Yeah, you have a better engine, you're a little bit better in flight performance, but when it comes to ARB and getting kills in ARB, not cast or not ground RB related, your plane still sucks, and this BR is quite high for an F-111, and in my personal opinion, a plane like this just will not thrive that well. You gotta stay fast and shoot off your missiles, but if you get pressured, you're gonna get cooked up. So I'm going to give it a D tier as well, a high D tier as you have good missiles, but that's basically it. Alrighty, that's all with the USA planes, and now we're on to Germany. Our first German plane is the F-104G, and in my personal opinion, this plane was actually pretty decent back then when it was like 2 years ago, but nowadays it's not as good now. The F-104 flight model has been nerfed quite a lot, you lose a lot more energy, you are still fast, and the 104G has a decent little of 4 aim-9Js, but really, why would you play this plane if you can play a MiG-21 BIS instead at the same BR with more missiles and a better flight model? So a plane like this, having a bad flight performance and a mid-missile loadout just isn't that great. I think it's still not that bad, but I'm still going to give it a C tier as you are at 11.0 in an F-104 with mid loadouts. Alright, our next plane is the F-4F, and the F-4F is basically a stripped-down F-4E. You have the Agile Eagle, but you don't have radar missiles, and you only have 4 aim-9Js. Now, albeit, the F-4F has a better, I guess, flight performance than the F-104G, but you're in the same boat where, why would you play this thing when you can play the MiG-21 BIS? So, once again, it's going to be better as it has a better flight model, but I'm still going to put it next to the 104J. Alright, our next plane is the MiG-21 MF, and this plane is very, very strong. It got moved down to 10.3 recently, and that is really unnecessary as this plane is already disrespectfully strong. It is a very good flight model, is very beginner friendly, and we have a pretty good loadout of 4 R60s. Now, at 10.3, when you get down tiers, you're going to shoot at flareless planes left and right. You have a great flight model, good acceleration, very fast, very high AOA, albeit you lose a lot of speed, so be careful of that. But still, this plane will be a dominator, and in my personal opinion, some of the best planes in the game, one of my favorite MiG-21s to fly. I will be putting it in S tier, not above the American planes, as I think, I prefer them over the MiG-21s, but, personal opinion is a factor a little bit here. Alrighty, our next plane is the MiG-21 BIS SAO, and I just want to say, this is the only MiG-21 BIS in the tier list, and there are very minor differences between the BIS SAO and the other BISs. As far as I know, they have different flare pod placements, but that really means nothing in ARB. Alright, the MiG-21 BIS SAO is a pretty interesting plane. 11.0 is a pretty low BR for this thing, and this plane has 6 R60Ms. You can also carry R13s, so this plane has a pretty lethal loadout. Your flight performance is really good, and you have, once again, the high acceleration, the good top speed, and also the great turn. So in my opinion, this is an A tier worth plane. I would be putting it above the F4E, and I think it is a very fun plane to fly, especially for aggressive players. Just don't get too slow, or you're going to get licked up. Alright, our next plane is the MiG-23 MLA, and the MiG-23's ML variants were very, very strong back in the day, and they were prime top tier once. The thing is, the MiG-23s have been nerfed a little bit, so the flight model is not as strong in basically every aspect. Still though, you're at 11.7 and you're a 0.3 BR under the Phantoms with radar missiles, so it's a pretty good BR. You do get, a pretty good matchmaker, and you have a very good loadout. Your R60Ms, they're okay, but your R24Rs are very, very strong. The flight performance, it's gotten nerfed, but it's still very good, and I think this is one of the most solid planes you can fly in War Thunder right now. In my personal opinion, I enjoyed this plane more than the MiG-21s, but I guess I can see how people would say it might be worse. So I will be putting it in S tier above the MiG-21 MF, as I think it was a little bit more fun, especially with the kill potential and the 24Rs. Our next plane is the Su-22 and this plane is pretty interesting. Now, you're 11.3, and you also have 6 R60Ms. You have a load of countermeasures around 156 or 128, so that is a lot of flares, more than enough to sufficient you, and this plane is just very good when it comes to kill loadout. The problem is, this plane has a terrible flight model, and a lot of people say it's really bad, but in my personal opinion, it's not that bad, but really, when someone gets under 6, you're going to be screwed. It's a bad defensive flyer, and overall, not very good. The engine is pretty strong, but that's basically it, along with the missile loadout being relatively decent, so I still don't think this plane will be that good. I think it's usable, so I'm going to put it in B tier, but I definitely see how some people would complain about this plane. Alrighty, our next plane is the Su-22M4, and this plane is a little bit lighter than the UM3K and also has double the flares, around 256, so this plane is going to be straight up just better, so I will just be putting it in B tier above the 22 UM3K. Alrighty, on to our USSR planes. Our first plane is the MiG-21 SMT, and this plane is in the same boat as the MF. Amazing flight model, pretty good missiles, and you are at a BR of 10.3. For some reason, it did not have to get lowered to 10.3 from 10.7, but here we are. It's going to be very OP. The differences between the MF and the SMT is the SMT has a better engine. It is heavier, but the thing is, the engine is much better than being lighter, so in my personal opinion, this plane will definitely be above the MF when it comes down to ARB performance. Alright, our next plane is the Su-17M2, and I just want you guys to note, this plane is 10.0 now. I'm sorry for the icon, it should be 10.0, but this plane has 4 R60s and is supersonic capable. If you get caught and you're going slow, you are dead, yes. But if you keep your speed and you are a competent pilot, you're not really going to die, besides maybe AV-8 with a Harrier shooting down the A9J or A9G. But realistically, this plane is going to be pretty powerful. You are going to be screwed in an up tier, but a plane like this, I feel like, just is a little bit too low. And I feel like it definitely can work, but in my personal opinion, this plane is just pretty garbage when it comes down to flight performance, but just has a terrible BR and a terrible loadout for the planes it faces. I'm going to put it in a C tier. It's not necessarily better than the F4F or the F104J, but just in a better matchmaker right now. Alright, our next plane is the Su-17M4, and I've explained these planes before. The Su-17M4 is pretty similar to the Su-22s. Now, there are some differences. It has a better engine than the Su-22, so it's just better. The countermeasures is around the same, has a lot of them, and also has 6 R60Ms. The flight model, not that best, but it does have a pretty strong engine, and your swinging will help you in a dogfight. So I think this plane is very much usable, just not the greatest. I'm going to put it above the Su-22s, but this plane is not going to get you that much done, especially when you're getting pressured. Alright, our next plane is the MiG-23M, and the MiG-23M is an interesting plane. This plane is a worse version of the MiG-23 MLs. It has worse missiles. It has R-23s and R-60Ms, but it also has a worse flight model. Now the thing is, you're at 11.0, so it's actually a decent BR, and I feel like this plane isn't that bad. Now, it used to be pretty bad, but I think nowadays you can definitely make it work, especially if you are competent. The only problem is it doesn't have that many countermeasures, around 12, so you're going to struggle with flaring missiles, so I don't recommend getting too aggressive with this plane, but it definitely can work, and I think a plane like this is going to be relatively usable in A or B, so I will be giving it a high B tier. Now our next plane is the MLD MiG-23, and once again I've explained this with the MLA. This plane is amazing, it has gotten nerfed a little bit, but overall still a very good flight model, very good missiles. Your R-24Rs are very lethal, I recommend you run those. The difference between the MLD and the MLA is the MLD has leading edge slats, making it a little bit more maneuverable, but the thing is, the MLA has a lot better retention. Well, not a lot better, but better retention. Me personally, I take retention over maneuverability, as that's kind of my playstyle, but some people might take the MLD over it. But in my personal opinion, I like 1v3ing, I like 1v2ing people, and that's something very good at in MiG-23s or even any, I guess, swing-wing aircraft. So I think this plane will be under the MLA, but still not a bad plane at all. Now, our next plane is the Su-24M, and the Su-24M is interesting. It has 4 R60s, and it is at a lateral rating of 11.3. Here's the thing, though. You have a pretty bad flight model. Once again, you lose a lot of speed, kind of similar to the F-111A. You have countermeasures, but once again, your loadout and your gun isn't going to get you that far. You have a good gun, and in the hands of a right pilot, you can make it work. But come on, guys, this plane has a terrible flying model, and it's just very easy to kill, especially when you get it slow. So this plane is just pretty mid. I'm going to put it in C tier. Now, our next plane is the MiG-27K, and this plane is actually not that bad, just a lot of people don't use them in the ARB. Now, the 27K and the 27M, I'm going to rank them next to each other. They're the same in flight performance as far as I know. I did a lot of research on these two planes, and they're basically the exact same thing. The thing is, they do have different ground RB loadouts, which makes the MiG-27K actually better, but at the end of the day, in ARB, they're the same thing with their 4 R60Ms. These planes are not that bad, but I do see these planes being a little bit underplayed, and I guess the underdogs. People don't really use them that much, and I think if you do have these planes, try them out. They're not that bad. 11.3 is a lot better than some people think. So I am going to put them in B tier in between the Su-17 and the MiG-23M. Alright, on to the British planes, and our first plane is the Phantom FGR-2, and this plane and the F-4J are pretty similar in flight performance. The only difference is the F-4J has AIM-7Fs, and the Phantom only has Skyflash DFs. Now the thing is, the Skyflashes aren't bad missiles, they're pretty good at close range, but the AIM-7Fs are vastly superior, especially at 12.0. You have a lot more range and a lot more consistency. The FGR-2 isn't that bad. The thing is, you have a worse loadout, and you still have the AIM missile, so very good, but a weak flat model because you don't have Agile Eagle. I'll be putting it in a high B tier, as you still have very good kill potential. Now, our next plane is the Sea Harrier FRS-1. This plane is in the tech tree and also as a squadron vehicle, and it's a pretty cool plane. Now, the thing is, the Sea Harrier FRS-1 has 4 inlanders, and you're at 10.7, so it's at a pretty good matchmaker. You have a pretty decent loadout for 10.7, or a good loadout, I should say. The thing is, you're still a Harrier. Your flight model is not going to be good ever. You are slow, you have good acceleration at lower speeds, but at the end of the day, you lose a lot of speed, and you're just not a good dogfighter, and you're basically still a freer kill. Now, the thing is, the Sea Harrier FRS-1 has a really good kill potential, really good kit. I don't think it's that bad. At 10.7, you can definitely make it work, but I really realistically see this plane not being that strong. I'm going to give it a B tier above the Su-17s, but I still don't think it's going to be that strong. Now, our next plane is the FG-1, and the FG-1 and the FGR-2, as far as I know, are basically the same thing in flight performance and missiles, so I'm just going to put it right next to the FGR-2. Okay, our next plane is the Jaguar GR-1A, and this plane is pretty cool. Now, the thing about the Jaguars is they are not that powerful when it comes to their engines. They're pretty maneuverable, but their power is just really lacking. Now, the Jaguar, it does have a pretty decent loadout. The one in the British tech tree has 2 AIM-9Gs, but once again, the flight model is not very powerful. Yes, you can turn really well, you have good AOA, but you bleed a lot of speed, and you also just don't have a good engine, don't have good acceleration, and you're not that fast. So a plane like this just isn't that strong. 10.7, I think you can make it work, but it's just a little bit tough when you get into hard situations where you're in a little bit of a pickle, like a 1v2, 1v3, for example, not that strong. So I'm still going to give it a high B tier, probably above the Harrier, but at the end of the day, just not that great. Alright, our next plane is the Buccaneer S2B, and there's not too much to say about this plane. It has no gun, yet it has countermeasures and 2 inland, but at the end of the day, it's a Buccaneer at 10.7. If we're talking about getting kills in air RB, yeah, this thing's an F tier. I'm sorry, guys. Alright, our next plane is the F-111C, and this thing is pretty interesting. It got changed a little bit, so it is still heavier than the F-111F, but it has the same amount of missiles now, which is 6 AIM-9Ls. Not a bad loadout for 11.7, but once again, you suffer from the terrible flight model being, once again, you lose a lot of energy, and you don't have very good acceleration, although you are pretty fast. So I will put this plane in D tier next to the 111F. Now, onto the Japanese planes. We have the F4EJ. Now, the F4EJ also does not have Agile Eagle, similar to the F4J in the FGR-2. The thing is, you have worse missiles at well. You have the AIM-7E instead of the AIM-7F, and this missile just kind of sucks. For those of you who know, you know, this missile takes a long time to start pulling, and it will not start pulling until around 2 seconds off the rail, so you are at a huge disadvantage using this missile. Now, you are at a good BR of 11.0, and I feel like you can make this plane work decently, because you have inline Js, you have 8 missiles, you have a pretty okay loadout. The thing is, once again, bad flight model, your AIM 70s are kind of trash, and this plane just can be pretty frustrating to fly sometimes. So in my personal opinion, this plane will not be that strong, and I will have to be giving it a low B tier. Now our next plane is the F5A, and the F5A is just an F5C, and I'll go into a little bit more detail. It has 2 AIM-9Es, and it has a worse engine than the F5E, but I still think this plane is an amazing plane. You have the strengths of the F5, which is energy retention, maneuverability, and just a very good agile plane that has a very strong, I guess, loadouts and also guns. Now the plane obviously is a little bit lacking in speed, and it is a little bit lacking in missiles, only AIM-9Es, very easy to dodge kinetically, but still, this plane has amazing strengths that really overpower most planes. I'll be giving it an S tier. Alright, our next plane is the AV-8S Elite, and this plane is pretty interesting. Now, you're at 11.0, and you have around the flight model of an AV-8C or an AV-8A, but you have 4 AIM-9Ls, so a very strong loadout for 11.0. The thing is, this thing is just straight up worse than the Sea Harrier FR-S1, so this plane just isn't that great. I mean, it's a Harrier, sure, but I wouldn't really recommend playing out this plane, as once again, you can just play out better Harriers. It's one of the worst Harriers right now, so I don't recommend playing it at all. I'll be giving it probably a B tier. Alright, our next plane is the F5T SCU, and this plane is a Thailand F5, and it's pretty interesting. This plane has an F5E engine, but you have better missiles. You have the Python 3 and the AIM-9L, which makes this plane a lot stronger in loadout than the F5Es, you know, AIM-9Js. The thing is, this plane is at 0.3 BR higher, but at the end of the day, the F5s are already pretty low, and I think this plane is still going to be better than the F5E in your average A or B game. Alright, on to the Chinese planes. Our first Chinese plane is the F104J, and the F104J in China is ever so slightly lighter than the one in Germany. Here's the thing though, you have no countermeasures, so you will die to basically any missile shot at you. You're already in a bad flight model, you have a mid loadout, you know, 4 MNJs, you can make it work, but really this plane just sucks, and you have no countermeasures, and you're at 10.7. Remember that. This plane is not going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to have to give it probably a D tier. I'm going to give it a high D tier, but I still don't think anything with countermeasures is going to be useful at all in air or B. Alrighty, on to our next plane, we have the F5A, and the F5A in China is pretty interesting. It has the same loadout as the F5E, which is AIM-9Js, or AIM-9Ps I should say, but the thing is you have an F5C engine, so it's basically just a better F5C, and in theory it will be above the F5A in Japan. Alright, on to our next planes, we have the J7E. Now the J7E is an amazing plane for China. This plane is just a better MiG-21 in every single way possible. You have the amazing maneuverability, but you also have energy retention. Albeit your gun kind of sucks, it's 60 rounds, damage is bipolar, and it's hard to aim, but your missile loadout is not bad either. You have 4 PL5Bs, which are very strong. So, very strong plane in flight performance and very good. I think I'd put this plane definitely in S tier. I'm going to put it above the MiG-23, but beneath the F5s, because I feel like this plane just is not as good as the F5s, but definitely up there. Alrighty, our next plane is the J8B, and the J8B is a pretty slept-on plane in War Thunder. Not a lot of people play it. It's at 11.3, and it has the loadout of 4 PL5Bs, and you can also take a Speed A's if you want. The Speed A's aren't bad missiles, they're pretty similar to the Skyflash. They're actually a little bit better, but once again, you have a bad radar. I think at 11.3, you have a decent loadout. Your AIM-9, or I mean your PL5Bs are not that bad, and your flight model is not the best, but it is workable. You lose a lot of speed, but you also have pretty good AOA. I think this plane is not that bad for an 11.3 plane. Definitely not the best, but I will be giving it a relatively high rating. I'm going to put it in a B tier above the MiG-27s. Alright, our next plane is the Q5L, and the Q5L is really interesting. Now this plane is pretty similar to a MiG-19 in flight performance, but it does have a little bit of differences. Now, you're at 9.7, so keep in mind, you are at a pretty rough BR. If you get down tier, you're going to have a good time. If you get up tier, oh boy, are you screwed. You have flares, but you also have no missiles, and the gun is really hard to aim, so realistically, this plane is going to be hard to use for your average player. It is a very good plane, I think, if you use it correctly, But honestly, for your average player, I don't see this plane being that fun. And I'm going to rank it based on your average Araby player playing this plane. I'm going to give it a C tier, but it definitely is workable if you're good enough. Alright, our next plane is going to be an Italian plane, the first one, the F-104S. Now this plane carries AIM-7Es and also carries AIM-9Js. You can carry upwards to 6 missiles. Here's the thing though, F-104S just isn't that strong. Once again, nerf flight model. You are fast, but you lose a lot of energy. And I don't see this plane being that strong. I don't see too many people playing it either. So I'm going to give the F-104S probably a low B tier, as I don't see this plane being that strong at 11.3. Pretty high. I think it should be 11.0, but you know, it is what it is. Our next plane is the F-104 ASA, and this plane carries 4 missiles. You have AIM-9Ls and a Speeder, so you're straight up just worse when it comes down to missile loadouts, and you're at a higher BR, 12.0, and I really don't think a plane like this is worth flying out. No one really uses the Italian F-104s anymore, so I'm going to have to put this plane definitely probably in C tier, relatively low. Alrighty, our next plane is the AMX, and the AMX is pretty interesting. This plane has the speed of basically a 9.0 jet, but you're at 10.7. Why, you might ask? This plane has 2 AIM-9Ls, and that does not make up for its really high BR. It does have good missiles, but flight performance is just mid. I mean, when it take it to 10.7, it's not going to survive and thrive as well as it would if it was lower BR. But once again, when you're at lower BR, you have 2 AIM-9Ls, which are 2 OP. So one of the planes that will be hard to balance. It's either going to suffer or it's going to have fun. So this plane just is mid. It has a good gun, a Vulcan, 300 rounds though, so it's going to run out really fast. But still, not a bad plane when it comes to flight model, just at a terrible BR. I'm going to have to give it probably C tier. I'm going to put it behind the A10. Alrighty, our next plane is the Tornado IDS. And this plane is the first Tornado on this tier list, and it sucks. This plane has a terrible flight model. It is, sure, it's fast, it has countermeasures, but it is very much a bust. It is a flying boat, essentially. Your missiles are 2 AIM-9Ls, which are pretty lacking at 11.3, and this plane, well, I'm sorry, it just sucks. I'm going to put it in F tier above the Buccaneer S2B, because at least you have a gun. Alright, our next plane is the MiG-23MF, and this plane is basically just a MiG-23M, same loadout, get the R-23s and the R-60s. The only thing is, the MF actually has double the countermeasures. You have 24, so it is in theory better, but still, not a bad plane with flight performance, just a little bit lacking in a loadout. Still, 11.0 is very good for the MFs, and I think they get a little bit of breathing room now. Hopefully you guys can fly this plane out soon and see it's not actually that bad. So, I will be putting it in B tier above the MiG-23M. Alright, our next plane is going to be the Mirage 3C, and this is a French plane, and this plane is not that bad when it comes to flight performance. The only problem is you don't have countermeasures, which will be a huge issue. It is lighter than the Mirage 3E, and it has a pretty decent loadout of 3 missiles. You get Magic 1s, and you also get a Big Boy 530, but this plane will just struggle at 10.0 without any countermeasures. Kind of similar to the F4C, but you actually get good missiles. I will be putting it in a low B tier, but just having no flares is going to make it a lot harder to fly. Now our next plane is the Mirage 3E. This plane is slightly heavier than the Mirage 3C, so you are a little bit less maneuverable. You also have a slightly stronger engine, and the same loadout. You get your 3 missiles, you have the Magic 1s, and you also have your Big Boy 530. The thing is, you have countermeasures, so you're actually in a pretty decent spot. I feel like this plane is pretty fun to fly. In my personal opinion, it's going to be probably a low A tier, as I feel like you have a very good flight model. And yeah, you're not as good as a MiG-21, but this plane is definitely fun to fly, and your missiles are more than sufficient to get kills at 10.7. Alrighty, our next plane is the F-8TFN, and I did a lot of research in this plane. It is pretty bad. The best loadout on this plane is 2 Magic 1s. You cannot carry 4 AIM-9Ds or the AIM-9Cs as you can on the F-8E in America. You have a worse engine, so you're straight up just a worse F-8E with no countermeasures. You have a good flight performance, nonetheless, you know, it's still F-8E flight performance, but still, you are relatively, well, a lot worse than the F-8E in America. So a plane like this will not be too high on my tier list. I'm going to give it a C tier, high C tier, but I don't see this plane being that fun to play because you don't have that many missiles. Also, you don't have a lot of countermeasures. Okay, our next plane will be the Mirage 5F, and this plane is pretty similar to the Mirage 3Es. It has no countermeasures. The engine is a little bit stronger than the Mirage 3C, and it's a little bit lighter, but no countermeasures will always detriment you a lot. And this plane, my personal opinion, will definitely have to be right up next to the Mirage 3C in a B tier. I'm going to put it above it because technically this plane is a little bit better when it comes down to flight performance, but it's not going to mean anything, so I will not be putting it any higher. Alrighty, our next plane is going to be the Super Etendard. Here's the thing, the Super Etendard is at a pretty good battle rating of 10.3, not a bad matchmaker, but you have a bad flight model for this BR. Your plane is not very fast, it doesn't have the best, retention or turn rates. It's not bad, but the thing is, you're competing against stuff like Mirages, F5s, MiG-21s, which is also 10.3 for some reason. And this plane has a decent loadout of 2 magic ones. You have flares. The thing is, this plane will definitely struggle in the meta, and it will never be that good. It's not flown out that much, and yeah, this plane can super cruise, but that's the only cool thing about it, and I don't really see this plane being that great in ARB. It does have countermeasures, so it's survivable, but I don't see this plane being that fun either. I'm going to give this plane a C tier, as I don't think this plane will be that great to fly. I'm probably going to put it, above the F-104 SA, but not above the F-104G. Alright, our next plane is going to be the Mirage 5BA, and this plane has no magic ones, but has AIM 9Js instead. It is lighter than the Mirage 5F and the Mirage 3E, but it is still worse just because it has a worse missile. Now, keep in mind that the Mirage 5BA actually has countermeasures, so you're at a little bit of a more advantage side, but the thing is, this plane will not be that good either, so I will be putting it definitely in B tier, but below the Mirage 3Cs. Alrighty, our next plane is going to be the Jaguar A, and the Jaguar A has 2 Magic 2s. It has a weaker engine than the Jaguar GR1A, so it is just worse. Now, Magic 1s versus AIM 9Gs, obviously one missile is better at long range, one missile is better at close range, but me personally, I prefer longer range missiles, and a plane like the Jaguar, which just suffers from having bad retention and bad engine, really needs a longer range missile, so I'm going to put it under the Jaguar GR1A as well on the tier list, right here in B tier. Alrighty, our next plane is the Mirage F1CT, and this plane carries 4 missiles. You get to carry Magic 2s, and you also get to carry the 530Fs or the 530 or the 530Es, so a lot of missiles to choose from. Not very good missiles. The Magic 2 is basically your only good missile. You have a lot of countermeasures, but you also have a mediocre flight model. It's not that bad. It's actually pretty good, but at the end of the day, you only have 2 missiles to rely on, and a lot of the times getting kills will be a little bit dependent on luck if your terrible Raider missiles actually decide to connect. I don't think it's a bad plane. I think it's worth of A tier because this plane is not that bad, especially in flight model. But once again, your missile is just the big capping point of this plane, having a loadout that is a little bit limited towards your only good missiles, which are your 2 Magic 2s. I'm going to give it an A tier. Alright, the F1C is another variant of the F1CT. It is 0.1 tons heavier than the F1CT, but has an extra missile. In my personal opinion, it's still going to be better as your extra missile can get you more kills, and a plane like this needs more missiles as your Magic 2 is kind of your only real way of getting kills. I'm going to put it in A tier above the F1CT. Alrighty, our next plane is going to be the J35D, and the J35D is pretty bad. It's kind of a sad plane. You have 4 AIM 9Js, so a really lethal loadout for 10.0. You're also pretty fast. The thing is, this plane lacks countermeasures. It does not have the loadouts or the flight performance it used to have back then, where you could be really, really maneuverable and agile with your, goofy off flight model. The thing is, nowadays, the Drakens have gotten nerfed significantly in flight performance, and you cannot do the crazy things anymore. So you have a mid-flight model, you have a good loadout, but you're at a terrible BR without countermeasures, so a plane like this, I do not find to be that great at all. I'm definitely going to be putting this plane in C tier. I'm probably going to put it below the S24, but not above the A10s. Not below the A10s. Alright, our next plane is the AJ37, and trust me, the AJ37 is not fun. This plane has a terrible flight model. The vegan flight models, if you guys don't know, have gotten nerfed substantially. They lose a lot of speed and basically lose to an F4E nowadays, which is just sad. Now, this plane can carry up to 4 missiles, but if you want to carry all 4, you're going to have to sacrifice your gun and your flare pod, so I don't recommend doing that. I carry 2 missiles, so I can still carry gun pod and a flare pod, but at the end of the day, this plane sucks. You have a terrible gun, a bad flight model, and you only have 2 missiles. Luckily, though, it's 10.3, so you're at a lot better of a battle rating, but I still don't see this plane being that good, as, once again, your flight performance sucks. You have good acceleration and insane top speed for a 10.3, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be that great. I'm personally going to give it a high C tier, but I don't see this plane being that great. The only thing about it that's going for it is its battle rating and the engine being strong. Now our next plane is the JA-37C, and yes, this plane has a better engine than the AJ-37, but it also suffers still from the same issues where you have a terrible flight model, you bleed way too much speed, and your acceleration doesn't really make up too much for it. Don't mind me though, this plane is still very, very fast. It has good missiles. RB-71DFs are very, very strong. They're basically AIM-72s. You get 2 of them. And also an amazing radar for 11.3. You have a PD radar, a post-Doppler radar. You also have TWS, which is basically useless unless you're looking for people. But still, very strong loadout. 6 missiles. 4 of them are AIM-9Js. 2 of them are radar missiles. And along with your post-Doppler radar, you're going to have a lot of success when you get kills. The thing is, bad flight performance. Still though, this plane is very good. And I feel like it's actually going to be, for me, low A tier, as I feel like you can get things done with this plane, but at the end of the day, you can't really rely on your flight performance to do anything. Okay, our next plane will be the AJS-37, and this plane is pretty bad. You're at 11.0, and you suffer from the same things the Viggen suffers from. The thing is, with this plane, you can carry 4 missiles. The AJ-37 can only carry 2. You get to carry 2 AIM-9Ls if you want to take the gun pod and the countermeasures, but if you want to take the RB-24Js, which are the AIM-9Js, you can do that and carry 4. So here's the thing. You have a better loadout, but you also have a terrible flight model, and you're at a higher BR than the AJ-37. So in my personal opinion, it's straight up worse. Yes, you get countermeasures, but at the end of the day, this plane is just going to be around the same performance level as the F4F and the F104G. I'm going to put it in between them. Okay, onto the Israeli planes. Our first plane is the Shahak. And just keep in mind that the Shahak and the Nesher are based on the Mirages. As Israel, they bought a lot of Mirages from France. Okay, the Shahak is basically a Mirage 3C in flight performance. No countermeasures. You have AIM-9Ds instead of the Magics. And overall, just not that great. You get 2 missiles. You don't have countermeasures. I'm going to put it right next to the Mirage 3C as they're pretty much the same plane. And the next plane is going to be the Kernast. Now, the Kernast is just a better F4E. Your flight performance is basically the same, but you have a better iron missile, which is the AIM-9G. You're at a pretty good BR. Your AIM-72s are very lethal when it comes down to getting kills, as I've talked about before in the F4E section. The thing is, this plane just suffers still from the phantom flight performance. It is pretty good in kill potential. 8 missiles, not bad at all. Pretty good matchmaker, but you are just better than the F4E. So I will be putting this plane in A tier above the F4E Phantom. Alright, our next plane is going to be the Nesher, and the Nesher is basically just a Mirage 3E, but it carries AIM-9Gs and has no flares. Guys, I don't know what's with being the Mirage 3s having no flares, but this plane is gonna suffer from that. You have arguably a stronger loadout, depending on what kind of player you are, if you like range missiles or short-range missiles, but this plane, man, having no countermeasures is not gonna do you that well. I'm going to have to be putting it in a B tier once again. I don't think this plane is that strong, but I will be giving it definitely B tier. Alright, our next plane, or our last plane, is the Kafir C7. And this plane is an amazing plane when it comes down to flight performance. Very strong engine, very good maneuverability. The thing is, this plane has only 4 Python 3s, and at 12.0, no radar missiles. Python 3s are not that good. Their AIM-9Ls are a little bit better, but if they see them coming, if your enemies see them coming, they're very easy to flare. So at the end of the day, this plane just suffers from a bad loadout. My personal opinion, I think Gaijin should revive this plane, or revive Kafirs in general by making them a little bit more playable. Should be 11.7. The thing is, you know, what can we do about it? It's kind of sad because this plane is amazing in flight performance. Still though, I would probably have to give it a low A tier, but at the end of the day, I don't see this plane being that effective at 12.0 and only having 4 iron missiles. Okay, everybody, that basically wraps up the video. The entire tier list is in front of you guys right here, so feel free to take a look. I want any critiques, comments, or questions to ask me in the comments below. Thank you all for your support, for watching the video. I know that a lot of my content recently has been a little bit different, as some people have been complaining that I'm getting stuff wrong and information is incorrect. So in this video, I actually went in depth about every single plane I was unsure about, to try to get my information correct and give you guys a broad overview and the right stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.